Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. And this is our end of year episode. We're going to talk about 2023, the good and the bad. We're going to look forward towards 2024 and get some horrible predictions completely wrong. And we'll wrap up. I do want to start the show by saying thank you for all the support this year. It's been a good year and a great year even for Technical Roundup. In terms of just like the newsletter, the YouTube, the community we've built, it's just nice to have you guys. It should come as no surprise. We're not like super try-hard marketer types who'll spam our content everywhere and do TikToks and short reels and all that type of stuff. But the community we do have, they're super engaged and you are super engaged. The comments are always fun to read. And it's just a good part of my week. I'm sure you feel the same way, Don.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's been actually quite nice. Yeah, it's been growing, I think, and it's been feeling good. It's been fun.
There you go. Also, use our fucking ref link, otherwise the whole thing is pointless. And as soon as it drops below a certain volume threshold, I'm fucking out of here. You'll never see this shit again. No, I'm joking. But yeah, let's talk about 2023 first, because it's been a weird year, Don. I think thematically, the main thing that stands out for me is that we seemingly survived, because even that much wasn't obvious towards the end of last year with the industry imploding. I think even the sort of big bulls in that sounds funny with a British accent. Sorry. The particularly bullish participants, let's go with that, with a long-term sort of view for crypto, still thought that the industry would be around and ultimately make it past the implosion and the sort of correction, if you will, from 2022 onwards. But I think most people had way longer time horizons for this. Reputationally, we're fucked. It's going to take years of consolidation. This is really rough. We will be fine, but it's going to take a while. I think macro sentiment, when we were all looking at NFP, CPI, PPI, HFSP, all this shit, it was also pretty bad. Like, oh my God, the recession is coming. We're fucking doomed. Bread lines in Germany, as one famous commentator said. Don't know if you know him. but that basically made for a bit of a hodgepodge of sentiment where it's like, well, our industry is dead and risk taking is kind of dead as well, because we're gonna have this mega S&P correction, recession, or like shitty conditions with higher rate cuts for longer, and then effectively it just feels like we got bailed out to some non-trivial extent by the BlackRock ETF, which sort of accelerated and speed ran a lot of this, oh God, reputationally we're fucked and no one's going to look at crypto again. I think that just dragged us out. And then the standard animal spirits, momentum, FOMO, speculative spirits took over. And obviously the other things aligned as well, like the S&P making new highs, inflation looked better than expected and all that. But I just feel like we sort of speed ran the pain that a lot of people were expecting in sort of post-2022. The transition period really ended up being quite quick.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's surprising to see us be at 42K after the year we've had and where we started, right? Like when you think about that, Bitcoin was trading at 16K when the year started, and now we're quite significantly higher, even though all the shit that happened in 2022 still, that shit still happened, right? And we're still back almost to all-time high when you think about it. Like, this is just a very, very close kind of price action. I mean, obviously 40 to 60, 70K is quite a bit, but just for crypto, that's nothing, which is quite wild. So I do agree with you that it's just been a little bit of a speed run of sorts. We just kind of jumped the creek of worry by having BlackRock kind of pull us out, which is quite nice.
Thank God, dude.
Yeah, because it could have looked quite different. Yeah, I just hope that it's going to continue like that in 2024. I cannot take like a year like 2023 followed by a year like 2022 like too often.
Down only, up only, down only, up only.
Yeah. I mean, it makes for good trading makes for good trading conditions, but it's quite taxing.
You age like 10 years for every month. Yeah. It feels like that the market is like that. That's most of the BTC stuff. I think it's just really a story of like survival turned speculation very quickly. And I do think sort of, yes, macro played a part and it wasn't as bad and inflation, all that. But maybe I'm wrong in this, but I think a disproportionate amount of that can be sort of or was related to the BlackRock ETF. That's why I'm taking that news event so seriously, because I just feel like it was a bailout force this year. And if that gets like sufficiently priced in, or the event comes to pass, and the flows are not super inspired or whatever, I think that'll have like pretty significant consequences, you know? But that said, I'm like an idiot to some extent, because I recall having a casual Friday discussion with you about the 35K like monthly resistance. And I was there spewing all sorts of pseudo-intellectual shit like, bro, the last time we were up there, you know, rates were this and crypto credit markets were that. And I'm just struggling to, you know, come up with a scenario where without a new creation of credit and similar conditions, we just blast through 30K. So obviously we just fucking blast through 30K. So fuck me, I guess. So as long as we stay above that, it's okay. That's the cope there. But I like the headline risk is still pretty significant. We'll talk about the 2024 projections to come, but really thematically, I think it's we went from the. I mean, people might forget this, and the reason I like Casual Fridays is because we can use them as little screenshots and snapshots of time, right, and then come back to discuss what sentiment is like, what's going on narratively, etc. Earlier this year, the dominant discussion was whether we will have another cycle, like full stop, like whether that shit will go down again or go up again ever. And now it feels like the opposite is true, right? It's like, well, we've got spot ETF coming up, and that's not sell the news. And then you've got marketing from the ETF issuers, and you've got passive flows from the ETF, and you've got rate cuts in 2024, and you've got the halvings. Now we can never go down. It's like, motherfucker, I will never be in the same trade as you. You know, like, stay the fuck away from me. You and your can never go down, can never go up shit. You know, like those people are literally the worst to follow, I think.
Yeah.
But it's just funny how within the same year we went from one extreme of no new cycle to like no dips, no pleb left behind. That's very crypto, and I think, as you mentioned, that's the hallmark of great trading conditions when you have such extreme views in the market.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way you can get these kind of like 2x, 3x rallies in something major like Bitcoin, and then the 50% retraces that come after. If you have this kind of, people like fervor, really, like people go wild over this whenever it drops and whenever it rallies. Like the I told you so when it rallies, just the only thing that can kind of silence those, or like just kind of like be louder even than that, is the I told you so when it goes down, you know, like it's wild. I don't think there's any other asset in the world that has this, where people are just like 100% convinced that they are right, and that the opposite side of like the coin is just like completely wrong, and like it just gets wild. And then when price goes down, obviously there are shifts, and it's cool. Like I love that for trading, but it cannot be healthy. I think that's why we have so many mental health issues in crypto, because by God, if you see your net worth go up and down like this over like 10-15 years, I don't know what it does with you. I mean, it's just something else. That's why we have the craziness, which is also fun to see, really. But yeah.
No, I completely agree. I mean, as much as we complain in quotation marks about the extreme trending volatility stuff, it's also like exactly why we're here. And we'd complain more about the opposite of that when shit is like slow and not going anywhere, you know? Like, you can't create a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Whereas like, oh, volatility is so low, there's really no tradable rotations here. And then shit starts flying, you're like, oh, it's all too quick for me, I can't do this. It's like, what the fuck do you want, bro? Like, I found myself in that trap before, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you're German, you're allowed to. Because Germans are always complaining. So this is something that we have to do.
Yeah, it's a national sport here too. So.
Yeah, true, actually. I think the Germans and the Brits do it really well.
We're really terrible.
Oh, yeah.
In the spirit of 2023 stuff, in terms of stuff that stands out, what do you think you did really well, and then something you wish you did better? I can start this as well. In terms of really well, I think, and this is like almost cringy, but like in general, portfolio management from a drawdown perspective was really good in 2023, especially on the way up. I had a couple of setups where I just wanted to short, and I just didn't take them on a purely discretionary sort of sense, and that really helped. And so in terms of generally being not fading the high time frame rotation, that was pretty good. In terms of the bad stuff, and there were a couple of spot buys that were okay, but like realistically, I just closed them way too fucking early. So like that's, damned if that's okay. There's nothing sort of outlier special about that. In terms of stuff I wish I did better, I think there are two main things upon reviewing 2023, and I'm gonna do a full review like for myself a bit later on, usually early January. But like the thematically, the things that stand out are sort of, the whole spot buy and hold discussion we had last week versus like being a trader. Like some of those entries were really fucking good, but then I just started trading those entries because I didn't expect a trending market. So that's number one. Like if I have good entries, just holding them or not looking at them or being able to turn off my trader brain, I still think that needs improvement. I mean, that's literally always been the case for me. And I think it's just a matter of getting marginally better as opposed to like an on and off switch. That's the first thing. The second thing is, dude, like the altcoins that we spoke about and the altcoins that are on my watch list and like some of those levels, I need to like stop thinking so hard, if it makes sense. Like just looking, I was doing like a watch list review and update the other day, and I was just looking at some of these levels that I covered on, either Casual Friday or Monday Markets or back when Altcoin Thursdays was a thing. And I could have made a lot of money by just fucking eyeballing these things and like buying above, and that's it, just like brainless. Hey, this is a daily, weekly, bit of a big level. We're above it. Like, are we 2% above, 10% above? Well, it doesn't fucking matter. Just buy the thing and you know where you're wrong, And I haven't taken those types of like proper discretionary punts with meaningful size for a while. All the altcoin trading has been like cringe, tactical, not trending or whatever. And some of these have been like lights out setups, like the Link breakout and Solana and Injective and all this other shit where it's like, you can eyeball the thing. It takes you 30 seconds and the trade kind of jumps out at you. So there are a few of those where I'm like, man, it's just so much fucking easier than looking at, daily, weekly, monthly BTC, that type of stuff. So that's really, it's a bit of a flat one, I guess, in terms of themes or drama or like home run type shit. But thematically, just like not getting carried out, stuck in a bias, shorting shit or whatever, I think was a plus. Some good spot buys and trades in between were a plus, but missing out on like decent chunks of the trend, especially in altcoins, despite having justifiable technical setups, I think is a bit of a kicker. That's my kind of thing. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been... I nailed the direction basically, which makes the rest quite easy. Like when I was so heavily bullish at 16K, I was like made the trading part of all of that quite easy. So I would say I traded Bitcoin pretty much almost perfectly, besides like selling a little bit early. So I could have just been selling now, and that would have been a little bit better. But yeah, but what I did basically, what I would say I did the most wrong is just being too lazy and not giving the altcoins the time of day that I could have given them. Like we talked about Solana basically the entire way up, and it was not like we were wrong on Solana the entire way up. Like we were completely right. Same with Link. Those were two that I distinctly remember where we're like, okay, I mean, this is just bullish. It's gonna go up, and I was like, okay, whatever. I'm like, I've traded so much Bitcoin, I've traded so much generally this year, that I couldn't care less. And at the end of the day, like Solana going from 8 to 110, 120, that would have been worth spending some more time on. That would have been some good returns. So but that is something that I always have. Like I'm lazy on the altcoin front. And the further I get into my crypto journey, the worse it's gotten, really. Like
I've got that as well, but I'm not sure whether to blame you or whether we have that in common. Like, I think I'd prefer to blame you.
You can blame me.
Okay, good. But I think that's a real downside. And I'm sure the show's audience is particularly aware of this fact about Technical Roundup, where if you're looking for like the hot altcoin rotation or, even the meme coin on-chain stuff, it's like, this ain't it.
No.
We'd rather spend 45 minutes talking about the monthly chart on BTC than the 80% move in a top 5 market cap type of thing, which is a downside, right? Like it's not even as you mentioned, when the moves are sort of that big and the technicals are like sufficiently clear, it's not like an entirely different thing. Then it is at least slightly idiotic to not at least try to apply your edge where it fucking obviously works and vol is higher and it's still liquid, etc. So
and it's not like it's like an illiquid market, right?
Yes,
like that's correct. The thing, right? Like I don't think any of us would have moved Solana. Like, it's not like an ethical thing. It's not like it's not a technical thing. It's not a, okay, I don't have an edge thing. It's literally just being lazy, which I think is bad.
Yes,
But
agreed.
I'm also not gonna change it.
They won't trap you, Don, respectfully.
Respectfully, I will be lazy. This is my calling in life, being lazy.
Well, remember, I've got my cope that I've got my dog shit Solana NFTs from like 2021, and they went up mega, so I crushed that trade. I can't believe.
Oh yeah,
you get outperformed, kid. It's like, let's not talk about the portfolio all-time high on the NFT thing, but like, technically there was a Solana trade there. It's just really hidden. You have to really look for it.
Yeah, we just ignore the part that you bought that Solana higher.
Yes, bought the Solana higher, like significantly. Yes.
I mean, but it's still again. We'll take it. But no, I think like for me, basically, I mean, I if I remember correctly, right, and I could be wrong, it could be a little bit more, but I had 1 or 2 missed trades this year, which is completely insane. It's my best track record in my entire career. Like the strike rate has never been higher. It's just basically I could have taken more trades, which is a good problem to have, really. Like when you almost hit everything. I think I got stopped out of a trade once, and that was it. So
is that the one I told you to take?
I actually don't know.
I'm joking. Fuck you. What do you mean I don't know? I didn't tell you shit.
Oh no, but I actually don't remember what kind of trade it was. I just remember that there was one, because I went through the statistics, and there was one that I was like, oh, perfect track record ruined.
You like stare at it for 5 minutes, being like, what's this? Why is my exit price like relative to my entry? I've never seen this before.
Yeah. But that basically has been it, like on the spot side. Like, and this was basically on like like having fun on the fun account. Not on spot. I think I didn't have a single spot loser. So that's been great. Like I cannot complain about this year, but at the end of it, like the last, I don't know, last 2 months or so, I think other people percentage-wise outperformed me just by betting on stupid shit. And that is something that could be better. And I mean, maybe I'll be more motivated in the next coming years to do the whole altcoin thing.
As if, bro, I can't fucking see you doing that shit. Like, let's be real.
I mean, the thing is, like, when Bitcoin trading works so well, for me, I'm just like, why? You know, like,
right.
Like Bitcoin's been providing me with ample opportunity, ample trades, and then if it doesn't, I'm more likely to branch out. But honestly, at this point, I'm more likely to take a vacation.
I was going to say, yeah.
So yeah, that's that.
But then Litecoin is the strongest counter argument to that, right? It's like you clearly trade altcoins, but like you pick some weird dog shit altcoin BTC pairs from time to time, and it's like,
oh yeah.
I guess the argument would also be like it'd be a lot more profitable to be late and less right on Solana than mega early and more right on BTC, purely from a returns point of view. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
There you go. If my auntie had wheels, she'd be a bike. You know, that's the old classic there. But now, obviously, like, you know, as everyone knows, you've had a proper fucking banger year, and it's been really cool to observe, and also just it's hard to do publicly, you know, straight up, because there's just a lot more pressure. You're much more incentivized to, I don't know, like dig your heels in with positions. You always have people fucking talking about you and then asking for updates and all kinds of shit that I personally found just deleteriously affected my trading to such an extent that I don't really do the super public stuff anymore, maybe to my own detriment. But you know, the fact you're getting away with it for like, you know, the 6th year in a row, that was good. And I enjoyed some of the meta commentary stuff. Like I remember it was like 26.4 or around 24, 26K, where you were underwater for a bit because you fucking bought that breakout. And we had a Casual Friday episode. I'm like, look, if you think Don is right, this is a really good place to buy because your entry is going to be better than his. Like that type of shit was always really fun to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's been good, but this is always like the law of equal exchange, you know. Like, I'm gonna have a terrible 2024. I can already see it.
Do you think that's true though? Like, does that happen in general? I don't know if that's true.
No, I'm just joking. It's probably gonna be good still. I think
Oh,
in
there
general,
I thought you were going to be fucking humble for a second. And of course it was a fucking joke. Like, couldn't be you.
no, the only reason why I say it is because people get like too complacent in copy trading me, and I hate it. Like, I don't want to have people copy trading me. Like, that's the stressful part, you know, like where you're like, fuck this. Like, if I wanted to run a fund, I'd run a fund. Like, why would I have people like constantly copy trade me for no benefit of my own? And then I have the stress of basically having to be right so other people make money, which is just not necessarily nice.
You got to hit them with the silicone, you know? Post like a really bad trade and be like, I lost on purpose so you would learn risk management. That's the fucking classic.
Yeah, it's so, but I kind of like, I struggle with that from time to time, you know, like where I'm like, okay, especially when you have like a win streak like I had.
Right.
Because then people like literally they close out positions because they're like, oh yeah, Don's on the other side. I don't want to take this trade, and I'm like, dude, just trade. Like, this is not going to help you to just copy trade me. It might get you benefits in the short term, but in the long term, like those gains that you might make, you're going to give back because you actually just don't know how to trade. You know, like you don't learn anything by copy trading anyone. If anything, you should be kind of looking at the way I think, which I mean might be an enigma with
yeah, I was going to say, God help them. Like,
but yeah, I think it's important to kind of do your own thing and not be reliant on others too much. So I always get stressed out a little bit when I have like a little bit of a winning streak because people just get like too crazy on it and they bet the house basically on something I said, and I'm just an idiot from Germany that doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
True.
So it's like that's a little bit stressful. And
it's, I mean, also, go on.
I had like back in 2018, 19, 20, and I mean like even now I have like I had funds approach me, be like, hey, do you want to trade for us, or like do you want to like kind of like be a part of this? And the reason why I declined was, I mean, one, what's the point? You know, like I don't get it. I can trade my own money just fine. But two, it's because I don't want to be responsible for kind of like the losses that other people might take because of my opinions, you know, like yes. That's too directly involved in all of that. And I definitely wouldn't want that to happen. And to then have people just go completely crazy and just copy everything and that kind of stuff is just like, it's stressful. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how public I will be with my positions going forward. Unless I have something super, super ironclad, like I felt like with 16K, I might be a little bit less on that front, just because it's been in general like a little bit of a stressful year, and I'm kind of glad that it went as well as it did.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and it's been good to watch. At the same time, part of the stress comes from the fact that people's sizing and conviction and eagerness to copy trade sort of increases with time when the original core trade has been running for a while. From like a swing perspective, that's what makes it fucking tricky, right? Like if you're shilling the mega bullishness at 16K, it's like, yeah, I don't know. And then, you know, price goes up a bit, maybe they'll listen more, and it goes up a bit, they'll listen more. But as price moves in your favor, you might be becoming more risk averse, but they're going to be like, oh my God, he was so right. I'm just going to copy even harder, you know, for like future trades or subsequent rotations or whatever else. And so that creates that's disjointed, because as you're getting more risk averse, they're only just catching up to the earlier calls and are pricing in essentially future calls and putting on more size and copy trading them more directly, which is technically the opposite of what you think of the market at that point. So it's like a bit weird in that sense. But, you know, I think Don, I had this Twitter chart. Do you remember where I had you, when we just broke up of 30K, I had like your profile picture above it and Capo's below it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So, you know, that was fun.
Good times. Yeah.
Good times. So yeah, that's 2023. Should we talk about 2024?
Yeah, we should.
We should. Okay. It's over.
It's so over.
Hope you had fun. So 2024, I guess the prevailing sentiment is, I think most people are expecting some sort of dip in, and also when I say prevailing sentiment and most people, obviously those statements need a ton of qualifiers. And I don't actually know what the fucking sentiment is. You know, you can look at funding, you can look at quarterly basis, and both of those are like pretty jacked up to get some expectation. But also what you consume on like Twitter YouTube, social media is going to be a creation of just the people that you follow. So someone's feed can be completely different from yours, and it's not entirely clear what the prevailing sentiment is. It's kind of curated based on the user. So that's all very messy and muddled. But in general, at least from the, all those caveats aside, from the traders that I follow and the discussions that I follow and the group chats I'm in, most people have an expectation of some sort of dip in Q1. Be it even if the ETF isn't a sell the news event, just as a natural market thing. I think at this point we're in the longest period of no Bitcoin correction of sort of 20 to 30%, maybe since 2010 or some shit. Again, I fumbled the exact data there, but I saw Will Clemente retweet this indicator, which basically tracks those kind of big Bitcoin corrections and how long it's been since we've had one. And we're in one of the longest streaks right now. So even unless you think the laws of the market has changed and no new dips ever paradigm, even if you sort of disagree with sell the news ETF reasoning or risk off ETF reasoning, whatever, just purely on that kind of cyclical correction basis, I think for most people they have some sort of case for that taking place in Q1 simply based on time, even if it's not narrative or catalyst based. I think the second part that's being discussed is just in general the bullish news in 2024 and catalyst sort of continuation themes, which would be, the spot ETF gets approved. That's good sort of locally / in itself. The spot ETFs get marketed because they're going to get mass approved from all these issuers, which is the expectation. They're all going to start marketing in the first out the gate to get as much market share as possible in general. Will stand to benefit the most. So the ETF marketing is expected to be a positive catalyst. Then just flows into those products, and BTC by proxy is also expected to be a big deal. Then there's like a weird sort of 0.3, like a 3.1 subcategory to that point. And this is a bit more conspiratorial, which is basically, hey, it would be really embarrassing if you're one of these really big ETF issuers. And when your ETF goes live, Bitcoin dumps like 30, 40%. So what they're going to do is they're going to like magically defend the price around the time of their ETF launch. I hate those types of arguments, When people talk about like, oh, there's like a ceiling or there's a floor on this type of shit, I get super skeptical. But I sort of get it. Like mechanistically, I understand. I'm not sure how true it is. Maybe a lot of, if anything, you'd want the pre-ETF marketing to be really strong. Not the post per se, like as long as it doesn't go to complete zero. I think that's kind of more important than you get hyped into the listing and creation of your product. But whatever, there's that's also a narrative. And then the bigger zoomed out stuff is basically some version of 4-year cycle, but now we've also got the halving, which is supposedly this really bullish catalyst, and then also rate cuts in 2024. So I mean that's a lot, man. As far as like number go up infinitely, the most people's outlook is some version of, oh yeah, well we'll maybe dip a bit in 2024 Q1 just early on, get the leverage out the way because shit is really ramped up, but then we have the rest of 2024 to coast on these pre-existing bullish chess pieces. What do you think of that, man?
I mean, I honestly don't hate it, and a lot of people have been saying like, hey, everyone keeps talking about the ETF being a sell the news event, so it won't be. My answer to that is basically, and I think CL actually said this better than I could, and he was basically like, there's a big difference between what people say and how they position, and what they say doesn't really matter as long as they don't position in that way. And I think a lot of people are basically like, yeah, we're gonna get like a sell the news event, but they don't sell, they just hold. And I think we're kind of in that where it's like, people are just like, there's so many reasons to hold this thing. Even if we get to sell the news event, it's going to bounce right back up. I think that's kind of the prevailing kind of like positioning in the market right now. But I think it's not necessarily the dumbest thing to think, right? Just based on all of those kind of narratives that you could get and the ones that you just mentioned, plentiful. I'm just kind of like, I had a lot of people kind of tell me at 16K that there was no reason to buy because the world was gonna be in a recession, basically. Monetary policy was terrible for risk assets, and everything was doomed, right? And people
Europe was freezing, Don. We were gonna freeze to death.
Literally, like people were like, you're gonna have to buy blankets to make sure that you don't freeze in the winter, all that kind of shit, right? That was 16K. Now none of that shit happened, right? Like literally it just went straight up. So to kind of infer that the opposite is gonna happen, as in like we have all of these good news and now price is gonna go infinitely up, I don't know, that didn't really work at like at the lows with the negative side of things. So I'm not entirely sure if that's gonna work for the highs. As in, like I'm a little bit more pessimistic than other people. That said, I honestly think we might get, like, just for like a prediction kind of thing, we might get the sell the news event thing, but then we might just go sideways afterwards. Like I've seen a bunch of people kind of like speculate on the market just going straight to all-time high, and I'm just kind of like, it seems a little bit far-fetched just based on where we're coming from, like how this bear market was and what we kind of went through. But also I've seen a bunch of people kind of target like stupid low numbers right there, where they're like, okay, this is going below 20K, is making new lows after the ETF
respectfully making new lows.
Yeah, and I mean that's just completely and utterly stupid too, right? So I think there's gonna be something in the middle, and I actually think the most likely outcome is just very lengthy consolidation in 2024, which is the most boring, but I think it would be the most healthy. And actually, for price, like if you want price to go up, I think the best thing that could happen is that we just have January, February, March sideways, even though we get the ETF announcement. Like imagine that, like we just oscillate,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, oscillate around like 40K, go towards like 35, 45, whatever, maybe 50, like stay in that range in Q1. That would make me the most bullish on the market. I think if we just mooned, I would be like, hey, this is a rally you sell into. If we just like went down, I would be like, you buy the dip, but then you have to sell somewhere in the 40s again. So just looking at that, like, I don't know, like for me, the whole, oh yeah, the narratives are so good, so it has to go up. Just kind of like I compare that to how the narratives were shitty at 16K. So I'm not on board with that, but I'm also not on board with any of the Doomer targets, or I'm also not on board with any of the like Boomer or Doomer targets, whatever. Like I'm not on board with all-time highs in 2024. I could see it happen, but I think it's not super likely. And I'm very much not on board with new lows. I think the chance of that happening is below 1% for me in my head. Like 16K, I don't think is going to happen. And 14K or 12K, what I have seen people mention, like almost guaranteed not. Even if the ETF was denied, I don't think we would get 16K.
I mean, your answer, I mean, I get it, but like your answer there is so fucking funny because I'm basically asking, what do you think is gonna, like, what kind of girl do you like? And you're like, I don't like white chicks, black chicks, Asian chicks. I definitely don't like it. It's just all in the negative. I'm not on board with this. Fuck you all, basically.
This is the European mindset, my bro.
That's so true. Yeah, it's like I think in scholastic, like in philosophy of religion stuff. I think it was Aquinas and then the scholastics, when defining God, they do it via negativa. Like what? It's like, what is God? It's like, I'll tell you what God is not. It's like, oh, thanks. Like, okay, I guess we can do this. No, that's pretty reasonable. The reason why a lot of these, narrative stacks don't work is because the market just kind of discounts them before they kick in and before they happen. We sort of had a whole episode on that last week about these things being more priced in than not. And I think it'd just be naive to assume that, especially given the magnitude of the move we've had, they just like, none of it has kind of kicked in yet. I do think there are real flows that will kick in post ETF approval, but that's not like immediate, and I don't think they're as urgent as like the most urgent participants are always going to be like the crypto natives speculating on future narratives. Right? Like those are the most sort of liquid, aggressive, sort of discretionary funds who are like, oh, well, TradFi will be interested in this, or this is going to be a thing. So we're going to start speculating now because we can just fucking, ping our OTC broker or just go on the exchange and start buying. And you're basically trying to front run flows that aren't there yet. And crypto native funds and stuff are really fucking good at doing that. The problem is when you're front running future flows that end up not materializing. And I think that was a lot of 2021 where it was like, oh, well, this is the year of institutional adoption and it's going to be Tesla and whatever else. But realistically, it was like crypto funds plus MicroStrategy, right? And then we had just like an internal credit bubble created within it. And it wasn't that much sort of external participation. And the whole Bitcoin on the balance sheet narrative, like, basically didn't fucking happen. So that's why I think you can sort of fragment those flows in two, where you have just like really aggressive, really early ear on the ground crypto funds, front running future sort of slower flows. And that's a two-part process. because the aggression and a lot of the pricing in will be done by those early participants. And then it's a separate question as to whether the subsequent flows like are a thing and how aggressive they are and so on and so forth. At least that's how I think about it. So.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned that that one argument that the bulls have, basically, that is like, hey, BlackRock is gonna kind of embarrass themselves if the price goes down too much after the ETF announcement. We had the same discussion in 2017.
Yeah, we totally did. Yeah.
when Bitcoin topped at 20K, or like,
I mean, the CME would never, you know.
I mean, how could the CME, like, this is gonna be the big embarrassment of the century, and then Bitcoin went from 20K to basically zero, and people were like, oh, oops. Now I think this one is a little bit different. I wouldn't necessarily be like, hey, this is gonna be the same, just because the narrative is the same, because I think this is actually, like, BlackRock is a little bit more of a serious thing than the CME in this case, especially given it's a spot based kind of product. But still, I would not bank on these kind of narratives, because, I mean, a lot of people have embarrassed themselves with Bitcoin, right? Like, people were like, there's no way Elon is going to sell his Bitcoin because that'd be embarrassing. He sure did. And I mean, like, you know, like all of these kind of narratives where people are like, oh yeah, this is just, people are going to hold up price because it's going to be embarrassing. That is just not how
Bro, there's like inverse signal there when people start reasoning in those ways. Like, do you remember there was a certain analyst who was like, there's adamantium support.
Yes.
Adamantium support at like 45K. And we spend like consecutive casual Fridays being like, just no. It's not how it works. And, you know, just magic price levels in general are dog shit. Now, I agree with you. It gets to a point where someone looks at like a fucking 90% correction and has not nostalgic anchors for the market, like fucking 12K, 14K, all this shit. And, you know, prices significantly away from those levels. And so they're not particularly acting reasonably. But it's specifically when people look at levels that are pretty close to the market now and talk about, well, there's no reason we would go below this. It's like, bro, you just gave us one. Like, fuck. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I would agree in terms of 2024. I would really be for something that was like boringly bullish, if that makes sense.
Yes.
That's probably the most sort of reasonable outcome. Like, it'd be nice to just rebalance some of the quarterly futures basis, which is at like 15-16% now. Historically, that's like pretty high. And from the lows, it basically 3 or 4x, which isn't a particularly good metric because of how these contracts work, essentially. But like, that's a lot. Like, we're seeing like the big bull market ARB style trades come back, you know, where you like buy spot, sell the future, and delta neutral outperform fucking S&P times a million. and those don't tend to stick around for too long. There are some good trade setups that come from those. Like, when you have a fat premiums across the market, and the market just loves to get into those delta neutral ARBs. When there's a washout, so many people get fucking carried out. Those will go from like a massive premium, and it'll actually get backwardated on a wick from all the liquidations. And those kind of short-term backwardation signals in quarterly futures, at least in bull markets, have been insane bottom signals, you know? Yeah. Where like everyone just goes from like fucking yield farming the basis basically to seeing that same contract go into backwardation. That's like A+ in terms of signal. So shit like that. I don't know if you saw, and this data is imperfect given that it doesn't include the CME, but nonetheless, altcoin open interest flipped BTC.
Always a good sign.
And that is fucking mental. Like, in sort of relative historical terms or whatever, that's a really big deal in terms of just the amount of altcoin speculation. Again, it's not perfect, but like, it's still pretty fucking big in terms of just getting a sense of where people are trading. Without getting, I mean, we'll talk about alts and ETH separately, but yeah, 2024, again, I'd be most surprised if we just fucking nuke sub 30K and like go to zero type of thing. And I mean like properly lose 30K and we're trading at like 20s type of thing. I'd be like, well, holy shit, I guess this thing was overpriced in. I somehow think I would be slightly more surprised, at least if it happens early, by just going to fucking all-time highs in the first half of 2024 without any type of consolidation or material pullback, at least of 20-40% or whatever. That would be super fucking weird, and I'd probably be really poorly positioned for like an all-time high break and have to FOMO the top, and then I'd make it a triple top. So that would be weird. I would like something more reasonable, more conservative, maybe a scary looking pullback that sort of gives bears hope that they haven't missed out on that much, but never really hits their low targets. And then the traders who pile in on that dip and be like, oh my God, yes, this is my chance before all-time high, they basically get fucking bored, because vol just kind of dies down. So they bought the dip, and then like, fuck all is happening. And then those participants who are expecting like a V reversal, that they puke, they're pretty time sensitive in general. And they'll cut, and maybe we move sideways for a bit longer and then sort of mark it up. Something like that. I mean, maybe that's just, instead of like a prediction, it just ends up being projection of what I want. That's always the danger of doing these things. But I think there's some rationale for it as well. In terms of levels, where do you think, with whatever version of that roadmap that we've discussed, what are the important ones where this could sort of materialize? Like, and on what time frames? I've got the monthly up right now. I think the obvious ones are like 58 range high and then 35 to 37 range low. Those are the sort of big inflection points in terms of the whole, at least look at the macro range at the very least. We've sort of gone back and forth, at least on Casual Friday, in terms of the midpoint at 43 to 47. I still think it's a good level, but it is a midpoint after all, and we have paused there a little bit. Is there anywhere else where you're like, okay, if it dips here, then this starts to make sense contextually with what I expect of the year, or like if it's below here, it's really fucked, or this is, if it spikes into this on the ETF, you sell that. What's the sort of swing trade roadmap, I guess, in terms of areas to do business?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few levels where I think just you kind of have to take a trade, and on the monthly time frame. The first one is on the buy side. If we dip anywhere, like if you just kind of like box out the July 2022 a monthly candle, like that's between like 19.8 and 23K. If we dip there for whatever reason, right, I think that's something that you have to buy. It's basically the best level of support that we have. Like that's I have to buy this thing. Now on the opposite side of things, like I have to sell this thing. I actually don't have anything. Just based on the fact that depending on how the ETF goes, depending on how the flows are, I don't think there's necessarily a high that I would be comfortable just like already being like, hey, you have to be buying this, you have to be selling this. I think anything like if 2024 goes crazy, and my prediction is it's not going to, right? But if it goes crazy, I think anything between like 80 and 90K would be an excellent sell, right? So like those two are the way out there, very, very likely not to be hit in 2024 levels, but those are like where you kind of have to at least look at it and be like, hey, should I be taking a trade? And I think of those two, I really like 20 to 23. I don't think it's going to happen personally, but you kind of have to always be like, okay, where am I actually gonna 100% take a dip, no matter how bad it looks, and that's kind of the level for me. And then on the more reasonable kind of front, I think you obviously have the range, like you said, like between 35 and 60. I was a big fan of this, and I was like, this is we're gonna trade in the range, we're gonna go from one end to the other. When we're trading much lower, now that we're so close to the ETF, I'm a little bit more ambivalent to it, just based on the fact that news events like this can cause price to go quite wild. And I think these levels are, or at least the 35K level is quite close in price. So if anything, I would want to trade a close at that level, not necessarily a wick. So what that means is basically if we get a sell the news event and we wick towards 35K, more than likely I will not have been buying it. I would want to see price go down, maybe even go lower than 35, and then come back up, and then it would start being a very interesting level. So that's 35K. 60K, I think actually is gonna, like, if we go to 60K, and that is actually possible, I think, in 2024. I think that's gonna surprise people because they're gonna be like, yeah, let's just gonna break, and I don't think it's gonna break too fast. I think you're gonna get a pullback from 60K if we go there, but that's gonna be temporary, of course. I think like these kind of tests, they don't hold for too long. So like there's a bunch of numbers ranked from kind of like most unrealistic, which I think is like 19 to 23, towards like more realistic. But yeah, that's kind of how I map these high time frame areas, and it can obviously always change, right? I think just based on the chart basis, like the most realistic and most kind of reasonable take is just being a monthly 35K enjoyer. But for me, that's you have to wait for it to actually close at that level.
You've come crawling back to respect monthly levels, Don. Look at you.
Oh yeah. I mean, I like the monthly levels, but I just don't like them in the news. So the moment we actually nuke the news, which is gonna be making my trading so much easier. I mean, to be fair, like buying 25 into the ETF news, that was quite like that was made it so much simpler, right? Because I was just like, I wanted to be bullish anyway, and you give me such a good reason to, fuck it, why not, right? But now that narrative is so old, it's become really, really hard to just look at the chart and be like, okay, this is where I'm going to do business. This is where people are going to get fucked. Because at the end of the day, it's very, very hard to judge how much inflows we're actually going to get on the ETF and how much that is going to impact price action. And before we see any of that, I don't want to make too big of kind of projections and kind of predictions. So that's why I kind of mentioned these crazy levels. Like people like, what the fuck? He's talking about 20 to 23K. Like, has he lost his mind? The only reason why I talk about these levels that are so far away is because we are running into a news event that might cause price to go erratic. And I don't want to make big calls before it. If anything, you're going to get me more reasonable after the event's over. So Q1, where I can, like, if we just don't move, for example, after the ETF, I'm going to be like, hey, if you ever get a dip to 35K, you absolutely want to fucking buy that thing, right? So it just depends basically on how all of that goes.
Yeah, and like for example, just to make that point very clear, like if the ETF is denied, you're not buying 35, are you? Like,
no. Like
so obviously it matters what happens news-wise.
Yeah. I mean, like if the ETF gets denied, I'm gonna put my bids below 20, like 19, 20K, and I'm gonna like be waiting there for a wick. But that's why I mentioned like 19 to 23K, because no matter what happens, I think even if the worst of the worst happens, you're gonna get a really good trade there if it ever happens, even if it's only a 2, 3, 4, 5% chance that we actually do get there. And then anything beyond that, we're just gonna have to wait and see, because it's gonna be much easier to judge this market in the new year. Yeah. In my opinion.
Once the dust has settled and we can stop fucking speculating on this thing already. I have narrative fatigue from like 2 months ago already on this thing,
And I don't want to be too bearish, right? Because people like hear these low targets or like these like low supports, and they're like, okay, I have to be bearish now. I actually don't want to be too bearish, because I think there's a chance that we just, like you said, just basically have a boring but bullish 2024 that starts ramping up, and then you don't really get the pullbacks that you want to get. And that could very well be the case too. I don't actually think that's too unlikely. Like if this goes sideways for 2-3 months and then we just start ramping up, like you have to be giga bullish again. And like on Bitcoin, the altcoins, I mean, they've been in their own world for a little bit now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if this thing builds a new base, then that's your new level, and you kind of have to give weight to recency versus historical levels type of thing, which I think goes understated. People just draw something and then fucking marry it, which probably isn't the best way to do it. And also, there are sort of price level agnostic setups like we discussed last week, like the classic 20-40% correction, quarterly futures spike into backwardation type of thing. Like, for example, just as, to use the monthly chart, what if we go towards like 58, 60K and then correct 30-40% from there, right? Or even 20-30-40%. Then you end up in kind of sort of nothing burger-ish levels, sort of at around 40K, which contextually right now, if you're thinking of 40K, well, that's not like a huge level and there isn't a ton going on. But if it were to get to 40K via that massive sort of correction and liquidation cascade, then suddenly 40K is attractive and, 32K is less attractive type of thing. So like the hierarchy isn't just purely based on what the fucking candlestick looks like. It's also where is the market coming from and what's the preceding context,
And the higher it goes, the higher those levels go too, obviously.
You should fucking hope so, right? Like,
I mean, that's why, like, I've seen a bunch of people, and this happens every time, you know, like people that like bought it at 100 and sold at $200 Bitcoin. They're like, it has to go to this support, and it runs to 1,000, and then it pulls back, and they're still sitting there and still hoping for the same support. And that they never got filled, right? And you kind of have to raise your levels higher and higher as price goes higher. Otherwise, you're going to be on the sidelines, unless you're right. Like, because you have to think about what is like how could I be right in this thing, right? And if it undercuts the entire cycle, and you're sitting here at like, and we kind of started a new cycle, right? At here at like 16K, and you're like, oh yeah, but it has to go to 14 or 12. Like, how can you actually be right on this thing? And the only way you can be right on this thing is if this is actually just fucked, in my opinion. You know, like, you can only be right that the market is going to 12 or like 14 if this is actually just like a bear market rally in the middle of like a general, just kind of like in a general kind of way of zero kind of
the everything bubble collapse, deflation,
Yes.
Wall Street cheat sheet, lower high, you know?
Yeah, I think like at some point you just kind of have to ask yourself like, hey, what would make me right? And if your targets are that low and undercut like all of that, I think basically the industry going to zero would be the consequence. And then I would never say that that's impossible, right? Because I think like crypto going to zero is always a possibility. I think it's unlikely at this point, but there's always a possibility. But at that point, why the fuck would you even want to be buying, right? Like, why draw support levels and talk about buying if this thing is going to zero, right? So I think at some point it gets too unrealistic. So you gotta be moving those levels around and the willingness to buy. And I mean, I sold 37.5. We're trading at 42.
Right.
If it goes, yeah, terribly. If it goes to 60K and pulls back towards like 42 again, like, you're gonna see me happily buy this thing without batting an eye. And then you might be like, hey, but you sold 37.5, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, so what? Like,
exactly.
Like, who the fuck cares? Like,
the market doesn't.
Yeah, like this is not how the market works. There were times when the market went up where I sold and it went down afterwards, and then I got to rebuy cheaper. But that is not always the case, right? Sometimes you don't get to rebuy cheaper, and you kind of have to forget about the fact that you held something lower before.
For sure.
Because I mean, if you always think that way, like, I mean, you're never gonna get an entry.
Oh, we'd have killed ourselves a long time ago, I think.
Oh, yeah.
If that were the appropriate frame of mind in terms of, I have this much BTC, ETH, Sol, Doge, whatever at this price.
Yeah.
Therefore, I can't buy because it's like a markup relative to. I mean, it's just insane. Especially as a trader, like, you need to be so sort of agnostic to your own price history in that sense. Otherwise, it'll just drive you insane. Because you might end up, what's a really good discounted buy one day is like an amazing level to sell another day, purely based on context. So if you like arbitrarily categorize certain prices of an asset as like good buy, sell type of things, if you're like actively trading, especially in a volatile market, you either just get left behind because all of your anchors are just way too late and far away from price, or you're just like never in sync with the market because you've decided this is like either a support or a resistance and you're ignoring what the market's doing relative to that level due to some weird arbitrary category. So I agree with all of that, respectfully, and we'll fucking see, right? I don't know, man. Like, it'd be very strange, I think, if we basically broke every rule in terms of what has worked so far. Like, no, the news isn't priced in. No, there's no sell the news. And no, there will be no 20 to 40% pullback. And no, there's no reason to dip below X level. Like, if all of that suddenly started being true, I'd be really fucking surprised. Yeah. But who knows? I certainly don't. I'm just going to bonk and trade this thing as it sets up. Is there any other time frame stuff that you've been paying attention to? I know we have that dodgy looking weekly cluster from Technical Roundup that's been causing short-term problems for price. Maybe we should delete it because the weekly close last week was below it, like the upper boundary at 43.1. Just like a random fucking made-up level in Technical Roundup. Just get rid of it for the sake of the industry. And the same in the daily to some extent, right? Like, this looks like a weird type of choppy range, lower high thing. at around between 43.2 or whatever that level is. You know your cluster,
Yeah.
right? From like
Yep.
that top bit. That's also been a bit problematic. So I think the easiest solution is just delete those levels and let the market breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that'd be nice, but you didn't do it. You didn't do it for my Litecoin, so I'm not gonna do it for your Bitcoin.
That's true. Fuck. Okay. Well. Okay. You know what? There's literally nothing I can say there. So
Yeah.
these rallies have been getting sold into a fair bit, though. Like,
Yeah,
you
I
can.
think it's people basically like just de-risking into the ETF. Like not everyone wants to have a bunch of exposure, and if you have a lot of exposure, I mean, you also cannot necessarily just sell into the news like everything. Like at some point you have some limits.
Yes.
So you
Well,
might
that's
as
why
well
the
just
market's balanced right now, right? There's some
yeah.
flows coming from, well, I'm going to de-risk into the ETF and end of year, whatever stuff. And then people on the other side of that trade are seeing the ETF as a continuation catalyst. So for them, shallow dips are completely within the mandate given the proximity to the deadline.
Yeah, I think basically what it is like you have funds, basically like big holders that sell a bunch just so they can stay nimble, and you have basically leverage traders and people like that are like, hey, I can sell into the news rip, taking those coins off their hands, and I think that's kind of creating a little bit of a balance. It's, it's not necessarily the most healthy, because you basically have a bunch of people selling like spot into a bunch of people being happy to buy them on leverage or just in general, just kind of like for short term stuff. I don't think that's necessarily the best, but I think both of those parties could be happy at the end of the day if it actually plays out the way people predict it to, which is basically just get a news catalyst driven kind of little bit of a rally going. Me personally, like I wouldn't want to be a part of that. Like that just seems like I don't like it when people are just like, okay, I'm gonna short term trade this thing because it's guaranteed to go up into the short term thing. That usually ends up poorly, but I could be wrong. And basically, what could happen is that you get insane ETF flows, and then the funds and the bigger holders basically have to buy back what they sold just to not look too stupid.
Yeah.
Always possible, but I give it quite a little, like I give it very little chance of actually playing out that way. If anything, I could just see the news come in and immediate dumpage start, which would be not great for the people trading leverage. Or funniest kind of outcome would just be price not moving at all, and then price just keeps on not moving at all, and people just get bled out with funding and stuff. But I don't think that's gonna happen either. So
That's the thing. If sideways is technically bearish, or at least it's skewed bearish if the cost of if the borrow is expensive, you know,
yeah,
like if funding rates are jacked up, that generally creates like an expectation for what your P&L ought to look like if you're going to be long, because they eat into your available margin and it's just expensive to keep the stay in position. So you either
yeah.
need funding to rebalance by that basis closing, or you need the fucking market to move. But if your funding stays jacked up and the market isn't moving, then you're just bleeding margin into expensive positions, which isn't great.
And people are basically justifying those positions by being like, okay, we're going to get the ETF and it's going to spike up.
Right.
So I'm going to get like a 10, 15, 20% candle that I can sell into, which offsets the funding losses that I have.
Correct. And miraculously, everyone catches the spike and everyone closes it at the same time and everyone gets really good fills on it, you know? That's how these news events work, right?
Yes.
Fine. Also, just as a sort of final note as far as BTC goes, the amount of hindsight posturing is going to be absolutely fucking insufferable once we get like a range break or like actual volatility. It's going to be like, oh my god, Anon, it was so obvious. This is just like the CME futures in January 2018. Obviously, you sell the news. We rallied into this made-up resistance that I didn't post on Twitter for like 8 weeks beforehand. And what else did you expect? And then if it breaks, it's like, oh my god, can you believe European bear tarts thought that selling the most important product in Bitcoin's history with all these flows and marketing was a good idea? Lol, plebs, see, thanks for the coins. Like, I can see that shit now, and I already want to mute Twitter,
Oh yeah, it's gonna not be too fun to see all of that, but
we'll be here for it.
That's Twitter.
That's
Twitter in a nutshell. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of people just kind of like taking advantage. like you said, like in just kind of making shit up, like their positioning, whatever. And then you're also gonna obviously, because I think there's a lot of people both ways now. Like a lot of people are like, hey, this is gonna be a sell the news event. Step off the gas a little bit. But there's also a lot of people that are like, hey, how dumb do you have to be to sell into an ETF? So it's gonna be a war zone after, which is gonna be funny to see. But yeah, I think it's gonna be like basically the ETF is gonna come around, and we're gonna feel the after effects of that news event for 2 months. I think 2 to 3 months is where I'm expecting the market to still be out of whack. Whether that be to the downside or to the upside is to be decided. But I think afterwards we're gonna calm down a little bit, and then you're gonna be able to make like informed decisions. Anything before then is basically all just momentum, and some people are good at that, some people are bad at it. But you kind of have to know that, like, I think you're gonna have a little bit of a like a market that isn't really trading like it usually does, based on how this all goes.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. Finally, at least we'll get some resolution. I hope so, at least. Like, if your scenario of like it happens and fuck all happens in the market, like we get the announcement and then it doesn't move, dude, that's gonna be painful.
It's the worst case scenario.
I'd rather not deal with that.
Like it's good for price, I think. Like literally, like if nothing happened for 3 months and funding rates kind of normalized,
Sure.
I mean, that'd be so crazy bullish.
Yes.
That you just have to buy it. But I think it would be agonizing to watch.
What we should have done is one of us takes a really strong stance about sell the news, and one of us takes a really strong stance on it's bullish. And then whichever way, we can just say Technical Roundup called it.
Fair enough, yeah. And then just clip that person.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Like clip the Friday episode and just cut the other person out, and then
or like edit in a part where they say yes, but like to something else, to like fake agreement. God, that's so pathetic, but also quite funny. ETH, Don, you missed the ETH BTC bottom. Actually, you didn't. You were a big trendline shiller, which was nice.
I actually was, yeah.
So congratulations on your trendline shill. I'm looking on the weekly. It's really trying for a change, but like locally, it seems like whenever we try to pump ETH, the market just sends us plagues and locusts and all that shit from the Bible, like the very next day in terms of price action. Like, how dare you try to break out ETH? Here's some absolute dog shit price action the subsequent day. I don't know. Like, this looks better. And
much better, yeah.
One of the narratives that we started speaking about early-ish that's been picking up some traction now is the idea that post-spot ETF is going to be the sort of best chance for ETH to do better. And you're naturally, again, from those nimble crypto funds and participants, they're going to want to front run that, right? So I'm sure there'll be some traders who are like, okay, well, now that the spot ETF is out for BTC, I can allocate to ETH. But obviously, you'll have people who want to be early to that trade and start buying ETH ahead of the spot ETF. And I think we've seen some of that already, especially because this shit is like a week away or something, you know? So it's not even super front running at this point. The counter arguments are obviously like ETH USD getting just nuked every time it tries to break out. I mean, nuked is obviously very dramatic. Like the weekly still looks completely fine. The daily looks fine or whatever, but it's been a very testing breakout, put it that way. And then the other counter argument is the thing that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that the risk of the rotation being, instead of BTC to ETH, just being BTC to red candles, you know? Like if it ends up acting as a sort of sell the news event, then the market will be particularly poorly positioned to it, because at that point, not only are they not in BTC, but they've chosen like a less strong, riskier asset to be positioned into BTC news, and they just get fucking carted out as the entire market kind of sheds some risk into the event. So where do you stand on, I guess, that spectrum? Where on the one side, it's, look, we're in a bull market, early rotation to ETH, no-brainer, post-Bitcoin spot ETF, just front-running the narrative. That's like the most bullish outcome. And then the most bearish one is like, you're just rotating into underperforming garbage into a sell the news event, get fucked type of thing. If those are the extremes, where is your radical centrist mind at?
You already front ran my answer. No, I mean, I think it very much depends on how the ETF is going to play out. Basically, like I mean, I wouldn't want to rotate early into ETH, just based on the fact that it's been trading like shit. But it does look much like it finally hit the trend line, like you said. It looks much better. It bounced. It looks like it kind of put in a higher low on the weekly time frame, which is the first for like in quite a while. But the fact of the matter is, like, my thesis is that Bitcoin is gonna, like, the Bitcoin ETF is gonna be sell the news event, which makes positioning myself in ETH a particularly bad choice, I think, just based on that. Because if the Bitcoin ETF leads to selling, why the fuck would people want to be buying for a possible ETH ETF? I think that's if anything, that's gonna be like bad flows on ETH if that should happen. Now, if the Bitcoin ETF doesn't cause a sell-off or even goes up, I think the ETH rotation is gonna be excellent. But I'm gonna be the one that just kind of waits that one out. I'm happy to be on the sidelines for a little bit. I'm even happy, like, at the end of the day, right? Like, ETH ranged for a couple of years, like ETH BTC ranged for a couple of years here at like in between 0.08 and now 0.05. It ranged here for almost 3 years, and even if it comes all the way back into the range and runs all the way back to 0.07 or something, then you'd be like, hey, this is a false breakdown of a range, and you're actually gonna get the whole flippening scenarios again. So even if I missed out a large chunk of the return to the range, I think there would be much more to get higher up. So I'm willing to be late on the ETH trade, based on the fact that I'm not too optimistic going into the Bitcoin ETF. Not immediately anyway.
And you can claim trendline clout, so you're safe to being late.
Exactly. And I was hilariously bearish ETH BTC the entire way down, and then I was like, hey, you can actually buy this trend line, and then it went up. Now, I didn't buy any of it, so technically that cloud is worth nothing, but at least I'm not gonna get roasted. I hope.
Yeah, you have like a folder on your desktop being like, ETH heads are trolling me, and it's just screenshots of your Twitter and technical roundup clips being like, hey, this trend line's good. I won't call you a retard, which I think is a quote.
That is literally a quote. Yeah.
If you buy ETH, so don't worry, you're safe from the culling masses on that one.
For now.
Depending
on how high it goes.
Yeah, no, agreed. I don't think there's anything else that's super interesting on the ETH USD front, at least. It's still holding the 2100 breakout. Like, on low time frames, it's agonizing and slow. Like, even on the daily, it's just been a very choppy range post breakout, which typically isn't great, but it's not bearish. It's just not as bullish as maybe we got used to, given what these altcoins and BTC breakouts have looked like. So that's different. And then on much lower time frames, like the 4-hour hourly, it's just been a bit sort of spike city at the highs, So, like, if you've been trading BTC and alts and you buy a breakout and then shit teleports, then this has been a bit of a more testing experience, but nothing totally worrisome yet. And ETH BTC, yeah, good bounce, good trend line reaction. Still has, I think you made a good point. Like, the headline risk to some extent applies to ETH BTC as well, right? Because, like, if the reaction is shit, that has implications for ETH BTC. If the market just sheds risk in general, that also has implications for ETH BTC. So it's kind of the same basket of concerns and trade-offs there. But technically it looks better than before. But I still think 057 is worth waiting for, Yeah. So that's the ETH front. I want to talk about Sol, Don. I also, like, if you want, do you want to know the best altcoin top signal right now? Like, I've talked about the sort of sentiment and the fucking bonk Solana phone shit, and the altcoin flippening of Bitcoin by open interest. All of those are really sort of, important signals. But there's one which is much more powerful, that I redid my entire altcoin watch list.
Oh.
Can you fucking believe that? Like,
why would you do that? I'm literally holding the market up by having my 2017 watch list.
What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? That's what we've got going on right now. But, like, I legit redid my watch list and got rid of, like, most coins. And so I'm just going to read this to you, and you tell me how many of these coins you've heard of.
Okay.
I've got ARB, AVAX, AXS, Bonk, DOT, Phantom, Injective, Jito, Matic, Mina, Near, OP, Audi, Say, Sol, STX, Tia, Uni, WorldCoin, and Woo.
Oh, I mean, I know at least half
At
Mr.
least
Shitty
half,
list.
So
No,
yeah,
I
I
think
redid my watch list.
I actually know most of these.
That's also bearish.
Yeah, very bearish.
Let's do Solana first, because
Yeah.
that's been the sort of darling trade. I think AVAX has kind of outperformed it for the year thus far, and that was a bit of a sort of stealth catch-up type of thing. But in terms of mind share and given all the meme coin stuff and flipping ETH by volume just as the sort of dominant layer one, I think Solana's the more sort of public-facing trade, if that makes sense. This thing hit monthly resistance. Now, I don't...
AVAX cannot. Like, there's no way AVAX outperforms Solana.
Has it not? I swear to God, I read something.
No. I call this cannot be.
Maybe it was like a relative pairing or something. I mean, from low to high on the USD pair. Yeah.
No, it's the Solana is up a shitload more.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know where I fucking got that from. Maybe it was like in the last week or something. It was like a local thing.
Oh yeah, locally, yes, it did better. For a while.
Yeah, it must have been locally. My bad. There was a period of outperformance. My bad. Yes. So Solana hit monthly resistance. Is this a real level, Dom? Or is this one of those things that you fucking hallucinate when you've missed out the bulk of the move? Because I don't know which one it is. I replied this level to an Ansem tweet. Because, he's like, I hope he doesn't get killed off as the main character right now. God give him health and all this other shit. But like, he's obviously the face, to some extent, of the trader sort of speculative side of Solana. And he's been very right in terms of just like this rotation and coin. He's had a very good year and just this move in general. And I had this tweet where I basically mentioned that, it looks like Solana has had 0 dips, but if you look at it on the 1 hour or 4 hour, there have been a ton of 10 to 20% dips, And just because the high timeframes don't make it look like there have been these massive technical high time frame easy retest corrections doesn't mean that the market hasn't been sort of corrective at all. And then he retweeted it and then commented something. And then to troll him, I basically posted this monthly resistance saying, this is where you cope. And also, fuck you for being so right. And hashtag Jewel, just for the sake of it. But it does raise a serious question. Like, I mean, Eric Wall said Solana topped. I don't know if he meant relative to ETH or if he meant just like full stop, but he posted that. And then depending on how delusional you are as to the predictive power of TA, this could be monthly resistance or it could be a hallucination of the deranged. So what's your Solana view as the dominant sort of altcoin, if you will, or the face of altcoin risk?
I mean, I really like that monthly level. Like, I talked about it when we were trading at 30, so I think it's not like something I just made up because I'm coping. So I could see this just even if this is not the top, which it doesn't have to be, I think. You would expect some consolidation, right? Like a month or 2 or 3 around this level would make a lot of sense. So I think that like the so to speak, like less risky part of the trade seems to be done. And this is coming from someone that was like basically like saying like, hey, yeah, Solana is the coin to trade and you don't need to look anywhere else for the last, whatever, 4, 5, 6 months. I think you can look elsewhere now. Like this seems like a good resistance and it seems like a good rally. And I don't think you would necessarily need to go out of your way to risk it on Solana after a rally like this. Now it could, in my opinion, it could go higher, but I think even if it does, and even if it breaks this level, it's going to retest it on the other side down the line. That's kind of my gut feeling, but I'm not trading it and I didn't have a position, so it's all cope and doesn't have to mean much. But you asked me for my opinion, so I
did. So in terms of, let's say someone wants to buy this thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's not an unreasonable view, right? Because the argument would be some version of, look, this thing has so much mind share and it's so sticky that even all the post FTX stuff, it survived. The FTX estate stuff, despite that, it outperformed. It flipped. Well, I saw some critiques of this data, but let's be generous and say like it flipped ETH in DEX metrics, right? And actual like chain usage and speculation. So clearly it's fucking different that despite all of these obstacles, it still has a lot of mind share, a lot of developers and people using it. And it's like the go-to speculation, L1 aside from ETH or even sometimes in replacement of ETH. Let's say someone has that thesis now, but are like, look, I'm only realizing this after it's mega marked up. And let's say I don't want to buy it here and I'm taking a slightly more tactical approach. You've made one argument, which is that, if it breaks this 100 to 120 and then comes back to retest it, that's technically a retest of support, right?
Yeah.
What is the deeper dip correction argument where they're like, well, I want it at a discount, or I want it like at a better price, or like a swing entry. Where's the support? And if you say $40, I swear to God, Don.
I mean, it's gonna be 44.
Fuck's sake.
I mean, like, let's be real. Like, you look at the monthly chart, and you're like, it's at monthly resistance. Where's the next fucking monthly support? It's at 44. Now, obviously, you can draw lower levels. You can draw the weekly, and you can be like, hey.
Do you mean higher levels?
Higher levels, yeah.
Fucking Freudian slip, dude.
No, I actually think like I like $30 to $44 is such a good level that even I would buy it. I think now I don't think it's necessarily gonna happen, because I mean that's a very, very deep pullback. But if it does happen, that's a nice level. You can also be like, hey, you go on the weekly time frame. You're like, okay, where is it actually interesting on a dip basis, right? And I come out to like a level at like 40, 48, 50. And anything in between, like I mean, you can be like, hey, I want to be buying 60. I want to be buying that cluster at 70. But at that point, like after a rally like this, I might as well just wait for the consolidation and buy into that. You know, like let's say it consolidates here for another like 4, 5, 6 weeks at 100, 110, maybe. But yeah, I think the support levels on the way not really great. So. Like it was basically down only into up only, and I would like there's no real base, no area where I'm like, okay, this is a really good level to buy. If anything, you're just gonna have to be like looking at the market and be like, fuck it, I'm just willing to bet on Sol being the outperformer, so I'm just gonna hold it. Or you have to be like, I'm just gonna buy whenever the entire market generally looks like it's gonna bounce as the strongest pair, and then just take my levels off of other things. Yes. I think that's also valuable.
Like the correlated flush type of setup, right? Like, yes, everything's getting stomped, but BTC is kind of at support, and I have a reasonable expectation of shit reversing, so I expect this to reverse the hardest. So even if it's not an amazing technical level, it becomes stronger contextually because of however everything else is trading, rather.
Yeah, like let's say you get the 20, 30, 40% Bitcoin correction, and then you're like, okay, Bitcoin corrected. I think that the lows, I think there's going to be things that are outperforming Bitcoin, and I think Solana is going to be one of them. Then you can make a good bet on wherever the fuck it is at that point. You know, like people are too obsessed with those kind of like with the in between levels that are not great. And they look at like the daily and the weekly after a rally like this, and like, oh yeah, I like the $60 level, $70 level. At the end of the day, it depends on where the market is at that point. Like if you get a pullback and the market is in the middle of nowhere and you hit the $70 support level on Solana, maybe it's actually not going to be a great buy, because this is basically the coin everyone speculates on. So you know that if it washes out, it's going to wash out proper. But if the market is at support and Sol is at support, no matter how shitty that support is, it might be worth a punt.
Yes.
So that's kind of my...
I straight up think there is so much edge in contextual boosters for levels, right? So, moving aside like pure TA, level A is better than level B, whatever subjective factors play into that. Just contextually, like if you think BTC is at support, or if there's relative strength, or there's a specific like liquidation cluster, or some sort of fucking correlation that you've noticed, or the basis contracting. There are so many like things in the market which can give a much needed boost to some of these levels, where context alone can turn a really good TA level into pure dog shit, and a pure dogshit TA level into something really good. So like that's why I generally rally against the, oh bro, I only trade the chart. It's all in the chart. You don't need anything other than the chart, because I think that the chart gets materially affected by other factors. And it's not like the same levels work the same way every time, right? It's like, oh, if it's got this many touches, it works like this %. Like it's not like that at all, right? That's made up. And like, all these like pattern strike rate things that people throw out. I mean, that's just literal fucking science fiction. It's like completely made up. There's no real empirical sort of rigor when it comes to those. Like, oh, 90% of the time when this shoulder and this volume, it's like, bro, you're fucking wasting your time. Because at the end of the day, the market is like positioning and flows, right? So it can't hurt to, positioning and flows, you can infer and sort of, project positioning and flows based on levels as a sort of baseline. But then other contextual factors are at least as relevant, if not more relevant, than the level itself. So that's why I generally think that, starting off with all the high time frame stuff and working your way down and being technical about it and all this is like really good. But if you want that extra edge and secret sauce, it's really the contextual factors that will that are more likely to contribute to an edge. Because realistically, like how hard we could teach someone in like a day how to fucking draw levels, right?
Yeah.
There's no edge there whatsoever. The real edge will come in like the discretion in deciding which levels to pick over others, when to buy them or sell them versus when to ignore them. Actual trade execution and trade management, that's the real nitty gritty stuff that makes money versus, oh, look at my nice box and that's it. Like this, I've solved it,
Yeah. I mean, the best example for this is 16K where I bought. Like we talked about this, like 14K, really good level on the monthly time frame. Everyone was kind of talking about 14 and 12K. And then we did this on the show actually. It was like, yeah, but look at this like level that I have from the lower high of 2018, and you're like, what the fuck is this level? and I mean, it is a shitty level. Like objectively, it's a shitty level. But it is a level, and the context was right for it to work. Now, you're always gonna find a good level where price turns around. So people are like, hey, look at this. TA predicted it. But like, which level is it gonna be, right? Like, and people would argue like it has to be the strong level, it has to be this, and I would argue like it very much, like you said, depends on context. Because the shittiest level can be the best level as long as everything else is right. So keep that in mind. I do this from time to time where I'm like, is there a level here? Because if there's no level here, even if the context is right, oftentimes it's actually just a bad trade.
Yes.
But if there's a level there and the context is right, a bad level can be a good level and vice versa. And then you can go from there. So
completely
you have the TA helps because you actually know whether there is actually any point of interest, because if there's none, it's very unlikely to do anything. But yeah, beyond that, you have to use your brain a little bit.
Like your level quality filter shouldn't be static.
Yes.
That's how I would attempt to summarize it. I sometimes even work backwards, if that makes sense. Like if I see someone like jamming the perps, like really trying to fucking sell into that thing and it's just getting soaked up, and I'm like, well, this kind of looks good, in like a short-term trade thing. And then I look to the left and say like, why the fuck is it being absorbed here? Like, am I missing anything? Could I like reasonably come up with a level to define my risk? And at that point, the context is so powerful that the level takes like a back seat. And that's still a sensible trade, like as long as there's something, the level is just there to define the risk, but the core of the idea is the sort of order flow or absorption that I'm seeing, right? Yeah, and other times you can do the fucking opposite of that, where you're like, look, yeah, there's heavy selling and fucking machine gun 100K clips being fired into this thing, but this level is so good that I do not give a fuck, like I have to trade it. And I think a good trading system can account for both situations, where the TA is suboptimal, but the context is screaming that something is going on, and other times where the context like just looks really fucking scary, but the levels are so clear that you're like, listen, probabilistically, this is so likely to just resolve in my favor, or at least give me a bit of breathing room. I'm just going to punt here because of the proximity to invalidation or the potential that this setup has,
Yeah.
God, thank God we said something useful during this show, rather than like, we're sat here jerking off over the next hourly candle normally in trading, and then we're like, yeah, 2024, let me tell you all about next year. Like, great. We've got a couple of news bits, very quick ones, unless you want to cover any other altcoins. Are you long, say, Don?
No, I'm good on the altcoin.
Okay, fantastic. That's the altcoin front. On the news front, I've got 4 articles. I think you'll really enjoy the last one. The first one is Donald Trump linked crypto portfolio has sold off Ether worth 2.4 million, Arkham Intelligence says. So I guess thank you for his exit liquidity. You should get some sort of postcard, Don, or something of that nature for, funding his ETH that he then dumps. To be fair, dude is dumping on breakouts. He's a fucking great trader. He's like, this is 100% a deviation. The market looks frothy. I'm going to sell the breakout. So this is
selling into the ETF news.
So this might be the first and last time you're actually aligned with Donald Trump on anything, Don. So I guess congratulations. Apart from name as well, which is something I
yeah.
don't think about too often, probably for the better. But yeah, good old Don. There are two Dons stuffing the breakout now. Just this is just really fucking funny to me. There's a lot of political controversy right now with him being taken off ballots and stuff. I don't know if you've been following that at all.
Yeah, I have.
That seems a bit Banana Republic-esque to me. I could be completely ignorant. I need to look into the legal side of things, but even if it's not procedurally Banana Republic-esque, this is the kind of thing that would completely embolden his base, right? Because if the whole prevailing argument is like all of DC is corrupt, it's a massive swamp, they're against me, these cabal of billionaires, and you'll own nothing, be happy, WEF types, swamp creatures. And look, I'm so right about this that they're trying to silence me and get me off the ballot. Like it's a terrible argument, but it's one that rallies the base, So I don't know how smart that is, but we're a politics podcast now apparently, so what do you think?
No, I mean it's wild to kind of witness. I mean we're from Europe, so we have a little bit of a different kind of view on this whole thing, and we're not in the nitty gritty like the Americans are. But it is, I kind of agree, like it's like you're kind of playing in his hands a little bit, but because I mean everyone, like that's his whole argument basically, like you said, and you're kind of just giving him more fuel to the fire, like you're adding more fuel. But also, like, how much dumb shit can you do without actually having any repercussions? Like it kind of goes back and forth, like obviously he's kind of like went a little bit, like he did stuff that, and I think both sides of the aisle should be able to agree on that he did things that are like borderline illegal at least. So it's kind of like, how much can you do without getting punished for it? But also, like how should you be punished for these kind of things? Because like just taking him off the ballots just seems kind of dumb. Like that seems just odd. Like you wanna elect him, then I mean you should be able to, but also like he does stuff that like endangers the democracy, whether you actually believe in that or not. You also obviously have to be able to punish him. So it's kind of like there's in a weird state where both things I think are just kind of like weird. Like you either don't do anything, and then you have a president that like kind of like plays around with the law a little bit, or you do like you go to these extreme lengths, and then you kind of just, it, like you said, looks like a banana republic.
So, yeah, that's the thing. I hate the precedent type of it, because like this is just one dude, like whatever, right? But like once you set the precedent for being able to take former presidents or presidential candidates just like off the ballot, I don't like that. Now whether it'll hold up in when a higher court rules over the case or whatever, it's a different question. But just as a sort of even procedural precedent that this is a lever they can pull, I don't like the long-term undemocratic implications of that.
And I mean I'm not a fan of both candidates. So
here's the radical centrism again.
Yes. No,
everyone is bad.
No, but I mean, like, I don't know. Like to me, it's. Then again, like most politicians are just kind of shit, and I think we can all agree on that.
Sure.
So, like, I find it not crazy to be like, hey, I don't like this politician, because I mean, to be a politician, you kind of have to be weird in general.
Absolutely, like power hungry, narcissist to some extent, like.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it always is going to attract like odd people.
Yes.
So like.
Yeah. Hey, but can your favorite politician trade ETH like this?
True.
If you're a single issue voter.
No, the only reason why I'm not a Trump fan is because he fucking relaunched his NFT fucking 5 times, and he dumped on my ass because I had a bunch, and then and it was going really well. Like I was up quite a bit. Like at some point I was like up, like I think almost like maybe I was up 6 figures. I think I was actually up more than 6 figures. I don't quite remember. Doesn't really matter. And then he fucking launched the same NFT basically again. What's the fucking point of a non-fungible token? If you could just like make
it's a different collection. Come on.
Yeah, it's not how it works. And then I got completely and utterly dumped on. And then I ended up actually. I don't know if I ended up losing 6 figures, but it got like it's middle 5, maybe, I don't know, on fucking Trump NFTs, because he kept on relaunching NFT after NFT. Every time the NFT does well, he fucking launches.
I mean, that's smart, isn't it? Like, he gets it. That's exactly what you should do with NFTs if you want to like maximize value and stuff. It's so much harder to like do a single mint and then keep that shit alive. Just like run it again. That's so much better.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, his NFT was actually doing volume, and he had ridiculous amounts of fees on that thing.
Right.
So he was getting paid quite a bit, and the fees died down considerably. So I think he actually would have been better off just running that one. I think right now, for example, if he just had one NFT, you make 10 times what he made, because people are just like not willing to trade it anymore. But his base is still willing to buy it. So I mean, he's making money.
Dude, didn't you win like a Mar-a-Lago fucking visit or like a Zoom call or something? You should have told him that. Like, you should have taken the offer.
Yeah, no. I mean, he didn't actually go through with it. So he promised people, like, if they bought X amount of NFTs, he would basically do this and that with them. As far as I know, he didn't redeem a single one of them. So
nice. No, he's like the ideal NFT dev.
Oh yeah. He figured it out.
He fucking knows it. So that's good old Donnie. MicroStrategy picks up a further 14,620 Bitcoin for 615 million. So
they keep finding more money.
They keep finding more money. Although the interesting thing now is, if we get mass ETF approval, I don't know what I don't think that's bullish for MicroStrategy.
No.
Because at that point, they're just like a super inefficient kind of Bitcoin holding vehicle proxy sort of thing. And why would you go through like indirect means to bet on Bitcoin or acquire Bitcoin or hold Bitcoin when you have these very liquid, much cheaper, well-regulated products in the form of spot ETFs? So I don't know realistically, post-approval, how much more money he'll be able to raise, because he kind of loses his entire edge and advantage. I mean, he's done super well for himself, and like MicroStrategy, like the amount of fucking Bitcoin they have is eye-watering. But I think a large part of that was, again, you know, there's like, okay, there's GBTC, but that's always at a mega discount, but that's been falling in line now with the expected ETF approval. And there's no like other good products, but now that might not be applicable because of the spot ETF. I just don't know how well positioned MicroStrategy is going to be in the future to raise money based on issuing shares or whatever, if it just kind of becomes a cumbersome, inefficient way to sort of bet on Bitcoin. Maybe if they offer some like yield type products and start lending from their massive treasury, that could be something. But in general, I'd rather this guy doesn't fucking gamble with his coins, you know? Like, just the history isn't particularly kind to like Bitcoin collateralized or crypto collateralized loans, you know? It's just that's not a pretty place.
The thing that I'm worried about, right? And a bunch of people like, yeah, Saylor, I mean, he's gonna hold forever, whatever. I think he is very likely addicted to just doing more. That's kind of like the when I look at his interviews and all of that kind of stuff, he seems like way in the clouds now, as in like he's just looking at this thing. He's like, how do I get more? How do I get more? How do I get more? And if you do this long enough, you actually get into territory where it gets dangerous. And we've seen a lot of people do this, right? Like if you look at Three Arrows Capital, for example, like I think that's one of the reasons why they got completely obliterated. It's not because like they were like necessarily like hilariously misjudging the market. It's just because they basically built hilarious large positions because they were like, we want more. And that's where it gets dangerous. So if he doesn't have the ability to get more anymore, he will try to find ways. And if he doesn't, they're going to get more and more risky. So that's a little bit like, that's something that you have to look out for. Like we're going to have to look out for. He has enough of a price impact. If he does something dumb, that it actually has an impact on the market, right? With his, whatever, 150,000 Bitcoiner. I don't actually know the number, but it's like somewhere there, right? So that's a little bit scary, I think.
So you have like personality critiques. It's like, you're addicted to Bitcoin, Michael. Stop.
Dude, you just look at how like any of the talks he gives or any of the interviews, he just seems completely and utterly deranged.
I don't think it's an act either.
No, it's not. Like that's him. He's just like that. And I mean, good for him, good for us, as long as he doesn't get even more crazy. And he has been getting like not less crazy. He's been getting more crazy in my eyes. So I hope he just doesn't he stops basically, and just is happy with the amount he got at some point. Because yeah, I do agree with you that the infinite money printing or Bitcoin printing business that he's trying to run kind of loses its appeal with the ETFs. And then what is he gonna do? And if he can only buy 10 Bitcoin every other month, I don't think he would be very happy with that.
Yeah, the change behind the cushion at some point is not going to be satisfying. But yeah, that's Sailor. There was a lot of commentary like he needs to get washed out before we go up. Just really,
that's bullshit.
Really ill-considered arguments. Yes. Really. So
the guy is obviously mentally ill enough that he really doesn't want to sell.
Exactly. Dude, it'd be so funny if he went through like a shitcoin arc where he's like, I've just learned that one way you can accumulate more BTC is to trade worthless altcoins against Bitcoin to get more Bitcoin. So I'm going to do that now to get more BTC. And then
if he started chilling like coins.
Yeah. A Sailor coin of the week. We've seen some funny shit though. Like, you remember the whole substratum thing at the ETH bottom where basically ICO raised a ton of ETH and ETH was just like nuking the whole time. And they're like, well, we have like an in-house quant trader who's going to use Bollinger Bands to buy the Bollinger Band lows and sell the Bollinger Band highs. Like, it sounds like a fucking joke for a sitcom, but that's like actually what they tweeted. And they got carried out completely.
That was the Pico bottom.
Yeah. That was the Pico bottom. So, I mean, it's the same. It works on the other way as well, right? When like devs of projects start tweeting about charts and price, you're like, oh God, this is fucked.
You really don't want to see that.
You don't. Solana sets record for monthly new and active addresses amid price rally. The reason I brought this up isn't as like a sole indicator or whatever. I think it does play into the whole comeback stickiness narrative arc, which I think is generally good, especially on like a multi-cycle basis. But this is just to reiterate the point that price makes for the best fundamentals.
Yes.
No one really cares about Fire Dancer or the amount, the fucking network liveness and delegated proof of stake and the consensus mechanisms. Like, no one really gives a shit. It's like, how much can I, how much is this thing going up? Like, how rich is it going to make me? And then how many Ponzi's and speculative games are there in the ecosystem that also have a chance of making me rich? And I think those are like the two primary considerations, and everything else is like a distant third place and maybe even further down. Like, you can have way better tech and it doesn't fucking matter if you can't give people the idea that they're going to get rich from participating or holding it.
Yeah, and you'd think this kind of just applies to the small fish, but it's really not true. It's everyone. Like, it's not like some funds are like trying to kid themselves about like this fundamental, that fundamental, but at the end of the day, like, everyone's just looking at how much money they can make. Like, when you talk about like, oh, this is a new thing, you don't talk about how great it is. You're like, okay, it's 10% of the price of Solana, it's 5% of the price of Link or whatever. If it goes to these valuations, how much am I gonna make? And is that like somewhat realistic? Like, that's how it goes, not any other way, which is quite hilarious for like this kind of size of a market, because our market caps aren't really that small anymore.
Agree.
But yeah, that's kind of what we're stuck with, for better or worse.
Yes, but also it's quite reassuring in that if you have like a decent technical grasp in the market in terms of like flows, liquidity, volume, momentum, there's a really good chance, miraculously, that the fundamentally sound stuff will also be on your radar,
Yep.
So it's kind of acts as a nice catch-all net. And this is a funny last one, Don. This is a nice sentiment snapshot to some extent as well. This is from the AVAX official Twitter account, where it says, last year, the Avalanche Foundation launched Culture Catalyst, a program aimed at empowering creators, sparking innovation, and propelling the adoption of blockchains. This initiative seeks to better position Avalanche to cultivate and support the many new forms of creativity, culture, and lifestyle that blockchain enables. So you're like, okay, that's cool. Now this is where it gets fun. The Avalanche Foundation intends to start using Culture Catalyst to recognize and encourage the culture and fun symbolized by meme coins by purchasing select Avalanche-based meme coins to create a collection. The selection process for this collection is based on several key criteria, including number of holders, liquidity thresholds, project maturity, principles of a fair launch, overall social sentiment, among other factors. So you've got the Avalanche Foundation fucking bailing out meme coins, essentially. Like, I don't know, man. Like, maybe I'm old, but this seems like frothy. I know that's like a classic, Euro bear tard type of argument, but like when you've got ecosystem funds, they should ideally be aimed at, like, I guess, apps that would encourage sort of sticky users and actual applications that use the strengths of whatever chain you're using, because actual dev work is really fucking expensive and, labor intensive and so on and so forth. Can you imagine the social pressure you'd have to be under, or just the amount of FOMO you have over meme coins to take this like otherwise serious sounding ecosystem grant and be like, basically we're gonna buy memes with it and pretend there's like some selection criteria?
I mean, if there's one, like, I really just dislike the people behind AVAX. Like, every time I see like they make any decisions, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ. Like, we saw it with the whole like what was it, Star Arena or whatever that they had on AVAX.
Yes.
Like the Friendtech copy, where they kind of lost a bunch of money, and then I forgot his name, but a leading guy behind AVAX was basically like, yeah, people only lost like
Amin. Yeah.
Amin was like, oh, people only lost like whatever 5 or 10 million of their money. It's not that bad. They shouldn't be complaining, basically. And I was like, dude, you're so fucking tone deaf. It's actually insane. And this is also like just such a retarded thing. Like, you're putting money into meme coins as a like foundation. Like, the fuck are you on about? Like, it's so obvious in what their goal is, and that's just basically like making the meme coins, or like getting the speculation, but the worthless speculation, right? This is not like where you put like value in or something. They're kind of like giving up on the whole, okay, we're creating value. They're just like, fuck it. Let's make the meme coins pump. And if we can get the meme coins to pump, AVAX is going to pump and we're going to make a bunch of money. But I think that's just like a very, very sad way to look at coins in general. So, I mean, I find it a sad way to look at coins for an individual. I find it incredibly ridiculous to use that word, for like a just for a bigger player, like, or for like people that are running a coin to look at the market. Like, that's just fucking sad.
To me, it's also quite sad how like unoriginal, uninspired, and copycatty it is. Like, you could make a pretty decent argument that the reason meme coins have a natural home in Solana because the transaction costs are so cheap. Yeah. And so it's like a natural emergent use case specific to that chain. And so that's less objectionable, I think. So you can make that argument. But there's obviously nothing sort of meme coin special about AVAX per se, because if there were, then we'd expect to see meme coins more prevalent there as opposed to on Solana or even on ETH, right? Yep. So the fact that it's not the case means there's maybe good reasons that it's not the case. And then forcing the issue by throwing money, like ecosystem money at it, seems like a bit desperate, you know? It's like we're going to force product market fit by just creating these incentives to go play really risky zero-sum games on our chain because we see other places doing it and we want a piece of that pie, basically, to pump our metrics. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, okay. It's like paying everyone to come to your birthday party.
yeah, exactly. So it's just fucking sad.
I'm not speaking from experience whatsoever. Long episode. Any final notes, Don? It's been a good fucking year.
It's been a really good year.
Thank you to, I mean, you, my co-host, sometimes friend, mostly co-host, for showing up on these Fridays. It's always fun, and I hope people can tell that we just come on here and shoot the shit, you know? This isn't like...
I think they can.
I really fucking hope so, right? It's not like rehearsed. We don't have a script. We don't plan things. We don't have talking points. You know, we kind of do this anyway, and now Casual Friday is just the outlet for us to catch up, more or less. And I think it just has a nice little niche for a show where we're like reasonably experienced, We're like transparent as to like our own approaches and thoughts, but also like just with each other because we're comfortable. There's no sense of, oh, I'm going to try to impress this person or whatever else. And it's just pretty, fun to do. And I hope that comes across. And we're grateful for our audience for supporting us this year and hopefully for years to come. I know we have our own weaknesses, like being fucking boomers, sometimes being a bit too bear tardy, not being great at altcoins. We hope that the other parts at least make up for it. And thank you to Woo for supporting the show this year and hopefully for years to come. They've made some really significant strides since we started. It's obviously all of our doing. But jokes aside, the like decentralization in terms of where the liquidity comes from, the general sort of execution on the exchange, reputationally, signing big market makers to turn it into a more, I guess, centralized exchange-like experience, the type we're used to in crypto. I think those are all really positive changes. We're glad to play some part in that at least, and can only hope that things continue to improve. Thank you. And Don, any final wisdom notes, advice from you?
No, I just wish you all a good new year, because I don't think we're going to listen, hear, see, talk, whatever again. No, we won't. So wish you all a good new year. I hope you had good Christmas and days after. And it's going to be exciting in January, so be ready for it. And
hell yeah. See you for the ETF week, motherfuckers.
See ya. Bye-bye.